What's going on, fantasy people? Welcome back to the True North Fantasy Pod, brought to you by Monkey Knife Fight. As always, I am Trav, coming live from the True North Fantasy Lair. And tonight, as always, I am in the lab with my man, Tyrell, the Douglas Fir McLaughlin. How you doing, buddy?
Wow.
How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. Selling me down the river with the middle name.
My thing is, like, if you want, for people to be wondering the context, you can let them use their imagination, right? Like, the fuck's the Douglas Fir,
I
bud?
do stand tall like a
Yeah.
big Douglas Fir.
Absolutely.
Of course. Yeah, doing good.
Especially when you're excited, am I right?
Well, I was excited heading into Thursday Night Football. It was a good Thursday Night Football game, but not if you're a Steelers fan.
Yeah.
But if you bit the bullet and started Dalvin Cook, if you ranked him as an RB1 this week, it was a good Thursday Night Football. KJ Osborne came through for a lot of people who started him in a pinch, or even as a top 36 wide receiver. And Justin Jefferson had 15 targets. It was a good day, but highlighted by Dalvin Cook. Some people were reluctant to rank him as an RB1, but sure enough, he comes out and puts up over 200 yards on the lowly Steelers.
Yeah, they've been a pretty good matchup for running backs as of late. And Dalvin, coming off that injury, very sketchy for him to play too. Like, I think the sentiment in the fantasy community was that he shouldn't even play because Madison obviously was looking fine for him, and give the guy another game. But I guess they were kind of fighting for their lives there. Minnesota, and they pulled out the W. The Steelers came back, almost made it they made it super tight at the end. Couldn't quite get it done in the end zone towards the end there, but a very good game nonetheless. KJ Osborne was a great start, and I think he's somebody that you're just kind of putting in as a wide receiver 2 if Adam Thielen's not in there, and then boomer bust kind of wide receiver 3 to kind of throw the KJ Osborne value spin on it. But I would be remiss, Ty, if I left the open in the dust. Want to give a big shout out to all of our content at truenorthffb.com. All the guys are doing great work over there. Shout out to the writers, the editors, everybody who's doing great work. truenorthffb.com, and on the socials, we're True North FFB in most places aside from Facebook, where it's True North Fantasy Football. And then right now you're watching on the YouTube channel. Please make sure you're subscribed. Please make sure you hit that notification bell, because we got 4 weekly shows with all of the crew. Tuesdays is Gold Jacket Pod with Jimmy and Connor. We're coming on the pre-records on the Thursday, Friday release, and then Sons of DFS Friday night, Point After on Saturday night, right before you're setting your lineups on Sunday morning. So the True TNFF Network on YouTube has got you covered all week. Please make sure you subscribe. We love it. Leave some comments. Hit that little thumbs up button. We really, really appreciate that. Man, it's been a good season. I can't believe we're already at week freaking 14, man.
Yep. And one more thing I want to throw out is definitely the fantasypoints.com subscription. I think, following us and subscribing on YouTube is a great way to support us. The best way is to go over to fantasypoints.com, get a subscription. It is the best bang for your buck. It's the best information from the best people to be getting your information from. Really one of the few remaining ways to gain an edge in this fantasy space, I would say, is fantasypoints.com, mainly because of the people that are there, the people are going to be there forever because they're invested as co-owners. And if you use 21 True North 10 all caps, that gets you 10% off a subscription that you probably already should have.
Yeah, you absolutely should have it. And then that 10% is on top of the already 40% discount they have because it's mid-season. It's not the full season subscription. So they've knocked, I think it's 40% off. It could have increased by the time that we had this. But anyway, you're getting a big chunk off some of the best information. And actually, Ty, some of the great work that's done over at fantasypoints.com kind of drove my stat digging for this episode. It's going to be a really fun episode that we get into. We're going to talk a little bit of news and notes, as we always do. Like to get in some injuries. It's really injury heavy. There's not a whole bunch of news other than a lot of injuries going into week 14, which are very important. We're getting ready for that stretch run. A lot of teams' playoff lives are on the line this week, make or break. So it's going to be an important episode. We're going to dive into that, as well as the meat and potatoes is going to be really fun. We love diving into some strength of schedule, and we're going to look at some players with some of the best remaining strength of schedule over the fantasy playoffs. So it's going to be a good episode. It's going to be really informative for not only the listeners roster, but for mine too. I'm super excited to get some of this stuff out, my man. And yeah, it's how are you feeling? How's your leagues going as far as like?
Yeah, I definitely have some nail
biters.
Yeah, we all have those nail biter, especially with some of the injuries that we've experienced at the running back position in particular, but also some of the whiffs at the top of the draft when it comes to all positions. And, some guys who are coming on strong now that weren't there necessarily at the beginning of the season, running backs returning like a Kareem Hunt, like an Alvin Kamara. So there is a lot of teams that have a lot of comings and goings, and my teams in my portfolio for fantasy are no different, but nobody cares about our.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of some of those goings you just mentioned, Ty, I'm going to dive right in to the news and notes, which we will have going forward, presented by Trophy Smack, another one of our great sponsors. Promo code with Trophy Smack is TNFF, and you can get yourself a free championship ring with the purchase of one of these shiny belts or one of the trophies that they have over there. So yeah, take your league to the next level. It's almost title time, so you want to have some hardware to be able to flaunt it, because you got to flaunt it if you got it, and you can't get it unless you go to Trophy Smack and then use that promo code TNFF to get that free bling to go along with the real hardware there. So thanks to them for that. Ty, like I said, injury heavy, a lot of dudes going down, a lot of opportunity opening up, and we are here to kind of unpack some of that. The first one that I want to start with is in New York with the Jets. Corey Davis, he had core muscle surgery, and he went on the injured reserve. He missed week 12, came back, had 3 targets on 25 snaps this past week. So nothing really significant, but kind of a decent start to his game. If he would have played a full game, you never know. Obviously, he's now on IR. What are you thinking for Corey Davis? Because I don't think he was really anything more than like a wide receiver 3 for our rosters. And we have seen Elijah Moore just explode over the last few weeks, which has been awesome. Like, do you think Davis going really moves the needle for anybody? Does it give Elijah an uptick? Do you have a little bit more optimism for one of those secondary options? Like Jamison Crowder obviously is there in the slot to soak up some targets. Those are going to be low upside targets. But how are you shaking that out? Are you even looking at the guy that's behind Elijah Moore on this team?
I mean, Jamison Crowder is wide receiver 4, I guess. Now I'm not going to fight anybody if they want to call him like a back end wide receiver 3, but I just don't want a guy with such a low ceiling. You know what I mean, like you can have in a mid tier with like maybe like a Jerry Jeudy, Russell Gage, some of these guys that we are starting still. Maybe Jamison Crowder enters that conversation, like with a Christian Kirk, a Cortland Sutton, like some of those Broncos wide receivers, maybe. But I would have started KJ Osborne over him. Like these are guys like, and maybe Tim Patrick is another Broncos guy. So that there's a tier of wide receivers there that are all like wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 guys. And I think Jamison Crowder is going to be one of the worst options when it comes to trying to capture a ceiling from that player you're starting at the back end of your roster. I think Elijah Moore wins. Like, it's hard to not call him a winner, but it's also needs to be understood that he's been hot since the bye week, right? Exactly. Like since week 7, like the Jets had their bye in week 6. Since week 7, Elijah Moore is top 10 in targets, catches, air yards, yards after the catch, and receiving yards. No wide receiver has more touchdowns than Elijah Moore since week 7. So probably set to blow, I would say. And then you look at that strength of schedule, it's pretty nice too. And, you can pull up some splits where you see that Elijah Moore's averaged like 16.5 PPR points per game in the 3 games without Corey Davis this season, averaging over 20 fantasy points per game when he sees 8+ targets. And I think he's at 8+ targets in 4 of the past 5 games. Yeah. And, I think he's like 2nd or 3rd in total fantasy points amongst wide receivers since week 8 or 9 or something. I saw Scott Barrett tweet that out. And, it's just amazing to think like Mike White, Josh Johnson, Joe Flacco,
so crazy.
Zach Wilson, like these are the quarterbacks that he's accomplished that they've been under center. So it's pretty impressive. And then, the schedule I just wanted to point out was the Saints, Dolphins, Jaguars, Buccaneers. Those are all plus matchups. The Saints, Dolphins, and Jags all ranked top 6 in fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position right now. So Elijah Moore really benefits, I think.
Yeah, I think it just kind of solidifies that he's going to keep on humming. Like you mentioned, all those targets, just the last 3 games alone, he has 31 targets. So that's double-digit targets is cash money. And then with the upside that he can bring, the red zone prowess that he's shown as not like your prototypical red zone monster wide receiver has been really, really good to see. So that's promising going forward. And yeah, I think if Zach Wilson can start hitting some rhythm with him, I think that's going to be really good, because early in the season, Zach Wilson did have a little bit of rapport with Corey Davis. He was the top 20 wide receiver in the first 4 weeks. So it was looking promising for Corey Davis. So I think it's kind of sucks for him, because I was looking for him to take that alpha role, but I think it just kind of pushes him to the wayside now that Elijah's blown up like this, and it's going to be interesting to see the future for old CD. Okay, we're gonna go to Philly. We were in New York, so we'll just go a little bit south, I believe, geographically, but I'm probably gonna just put the geography behind me, because that's not a strong suit. Miles Sanders is out with the same ankle injury that he was hampered with. He was out from weeks 8 through 10. And it's been a really weird backfield to decipher. We had a little Jordan Howard experiment. He's at least 1 or 2 weeks away from coming back from his own injury. We got Boston Scott, who's been taking a little bit of the work as of late. Kenneth Gainwell, who's been getting some of them targets as of late. Are you attacking any of these guys, or do you think that they just kind of eat each other to the point where they're not somebody who's going to give you what you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, they're running backs who are in a pretty defined role. I would say, as much as I like Kenneth Gainwell as a talent, we both liked him coming out, of course, and they've used him sparingly. But you look at the strength of schedule, they have Washington. Like, they're on a bye this week, so you're not starting anybody, obviously, this week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unless you want that 0. But they have Washington, the football team, twice in week 15 and 17 in championship week. Who are like 19th in fantasy points allowed. They get the Giants sandwiched in between there, so 3 division rivals, none of whom I think they're going to be in like such a negative game script that Gainwell is going to be extremely valuable if Miles Sanders is still out at that point. Exactly. So maybe you're gravitating towards Boston Scott, and maybe we could see the snaps and the usage go in his favor. And we obviously know Jalen Hurts is still the best rusher in that offense. So am I interested in any of those guys? In a pinch, yes. But are you going to win any championships off the back of an Eagles running back, even if it is Miles Sanders who's back in those matchups? Probably not. I think he's been a top 24 running back just 3 times this season, just a single running back 1 performance. And Miles Sanders has been a top 12 running back in almost 1/3 of his career games, I think, in 2021. Like, and that was in 2019 and 2020. So my questions that, like, I just keep thinking about where we should be valuing Miles Sanders in Dynasty, kind of like, maybe the quarterback situation will determine a lot, because Hurts and the Eagles haven't really thrown to him very much. And, just 10% of the team's targets this season. And that's, compounded by the team's investment in Kenneth Gainwell, right? Yeah. Who I guess is a conversation for another day for Dynasty. But it's almost a shame that these 2 guys are like on the same football team when you talk about Dynasty, because I think both could excel in the passing game. And for Miles Sanders, he's really started to show, as we hoped, that last season was the anomalous one in that facet of the game. And like, he had a ton of drops last year and, barely caught half the passes thrown his way. But this season he's back to a catch rate of almost 80% now, and almost identical catch rate as he had in his rookie season. So it has kind of been the touchdowns with Miles Sanders. We talked a lot about that. And, even the rushing, some of the inefficiency there, like some of the efficiency might not be guaranteed. Like, first off, Jalen Hurts and the quarterback play, that comes into play again, I think, because so long as he's the Eagles quarterback, like, he's probably the best rusher on the team. He'll factor into the goal line, and he'll target the running backs less because of his ability to use the legs. And these are targets that Miles Sanders might have to split with Kenneth Gainwell. But the efficiency, like, according to Pro Football Reference, the Eagles are number 1 in the NFL in yards before contact per attempt, very highly rated. On PFF, when it comes to a run blocking unit, I think only Miami and Houston, like, their yards before contact per attempt for the Eagles is like 3.4. I think Miami and Houston have lower team yards per carries right now. So really benefiting from that. But for Dynasty, like, what do you envision for Miles Sanders? Do you think he has that ceiling going forward? And for Dynasty, are you taking him in that like top 24 range?
I don't think I'm taking him in that top 24 anymore. I think the role has just changed to the point where they're just going to want to be factoring those multiple guys in, and they just haven't given him a vote of confidence all season long. Like, we were talking about it a little bit, and his season doesn't look that terrible as far as him potentially having, like, say, a top 20 season, but he just, like you said, has 0 touchdowns. And then you mentioned Jalen Hurts. He has 7 rushing touchdowns on the year. Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell each have 4 rushing touchdowns on the year. on a team that is top 10 in red zone trips and red zone percentage. So for like, you look at the profiles of these players and it looks like Miles Sanders might be the best option around the goal line. I do see the Boston Scott argument because he's a little bowling ball, but Miles Sanders just hasn't had those opportunities, and it's really snake bitten his perception amongst fantasy gamers, right? Because if he has a few more touchdowns, he is a solid running back for your roster. And with the injuries that have gone down, he would be probably a key piece at this point. You know what I mean? But he just hasn't been that. So I think I'm rethinking my expectations for him. I loved all the blow up games that he had before in getting all those running back 1 weeks that you were talking about, but those just have dried up seemingly. And I'm an Eagles fan. I watch the Eagles, and I don't see an avenue where they're going to come back. I don't see that coming back for him, even if he is healthy, even if he's being effective, because we've seen him be effective in spurts, especially in the run game. Like, I think he's improved a lot there because he was always a good pass catcher. And in the run game, I've seen a little bit more like decisiveness at the line when he sees the hole, he can kind of hit it a little bit better instead of dancing. But even when he's effective in that facet, they start peppering the other guys in. So I just don't think that's in their plans at this point. And he is a player that came from the previous regime, so you never know. They could be looking to start kind of retooling a little bit. Maybe the Kenneth Gainwell pick is kind of a first straw in that hat, or whatever you want to say. So yeah, I think I'm rethinking it to the point where he's got to be kind of getting near that dead zone, which is a little bit sketchy.
Mm-hmm.
So
no, I think he's like a 5th, 6th round dynasty pick at the best. Like, I'm probably not looking at him before that range in a startup draft, alongside guys like maybe a Cam Akers. Like, I'm taking Michael Carter ahead of him, probably taking Michael Carter, Cam Akers, maybe. I don't know, guys like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think he's right in that neighborhood. It's interesting because he's the type of player where just a little bit of a switch could make him be that again. I'm not saying he's going to be like this guy who you can count on as a top 10 option, but to be a solid running back too, I don't think it would take that much. So it's an interesting one, because if you're getting him in the 5th, 6th of startup drafts, he could end up being a great value at that point too, depending on how the backfield shakes out. So Miles is definitely one to watch. If I have him, I'm holding him for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll keep moving along through some of these injuries. Kenny Drake, real shocker for old Kenny Driz, Ty. 3 dudes blasted him, and sorry, phrasing. But anyway, like, that hit we were watching it together actually, and we had to take a second look at that because 2 guys sandwiched him, and then the other guys just picnic benching him just to go right over the top. And he got mucked by those guys. So I don't know. Like, I don't think Kenyan Drake was really doing a whole lot. I think he's only averaging like 3 carries and like a target or 2 over the past 4 or 5 weeks, which isn't much to really make me move anybody that far up. I think Jalen Richard is obviously the most obvious beneficiary. Maybe a little bit of Josh Jacobs, who's been heating up as of late.
Oh yeah.
A lot of really, really good stuff I've seen from Josh Jacobs. Do you think it's just kind of status quo for Josh Jacobs, or do you think just those extra snaps and Josh Jacobs' presence on the field means that he's probably going to be in line for more opportunities? Like, yeah,
I think a little bit. Like, naturally we go from Miles Sanders to Josh Jacobs. That's a seamless transition.
No doubt.
Those two will never not be compared alongside one another. But he played a season high 93% of the snaps. He played passing down work when Kenyan Drake got knocked out of the game last week, and he's coming off his 2 best outings of the season in fantasy now with Josh Jacobs. So yeah, Jalen Richard likely sees some passing down work, but I think Jacobs is a borderline RB1 with like a much bigger ceiling all of a sudden, you know what I mean? Yeah. And he's probably got the clearest path to passing down work that he's ever seen, you know what I mean? And it isn't Jan Gruden anymore. So maybe we see a little bit more excitement from the passing game with Josh Jacobs, more creative usage out of the backfield in that facet of the game. Hopefully Peyton Barber isn't too involved, you know, because we saw that under John Gruden too. So I think high-end RB2 is where I value Josh Jacobs the rest of the way. And if people are saying he'll be like a big league winner, I'm not sure I'm ready to go that far. Like, I might not buy that. The Raiders get the Chiefs this week, which is a pretty good matchup, but Cleveland, Denver, Indianapolis is the rest of their schedule. So a middling to poor strength of schedule. Waller's on the mend as well. I believe he did not practice yesterday. I shouldn't even look today. But that was a DMP yesterday. And we know what's his face. Hunter Renfrow is just on a tear. I think he has at least 7 catches in like 5 of his last 6 games. So I'm not sure that the ceiling is ultra high, but I think the ceiling is raised.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. I actually have him, just looking at my rankings for this week, I have Josh Jacobs as actually my running back 10 against the Kansas City Chiefs, just for that factor that I see him soaking up some more targets. You look at his just at his stats on the year, just the raw stats, he's already got the same amount of targets as he had last season. He's 2 yards shy of what he had last season. So things are looking up in that facet. And I think a lot of it is like what you said, Jan Gruden is out of the picture, right? And I like how you tossed that. Yeah, no shit. So I think, just keep chugging along with Josh Jacobs, and we're not recommending that you throw your Jalen Richards in the ring there, because you might get a little bit of disappointment. Okay, so last couple of injury notes here. Tyrod Taylor has a wrist injury. He is week to week. He missed some time earlier this year with a hammy injury, so it's all over the place for Tyrod. The guy can't catch a break injury-wise, and he hadn't been looking very good for the old Houston Texans as of late anyways, so I don't think we're really, grabbing the tissue to have a cry about him missing time right now. But Davis Mills comes in the picture.
I think the Patriots are still crying about Davis Mills, I think.
Potentially, yeah.
That game still just amazes me. I think it was like the quarterback 12 against the Rams a few weeks later too, but pair of games under 9 fantasy point sandwiches.
Yeah, it's just that little bit of slinger in him that just wants to kind of whip it around, and there's going to be the odd game where he hits it. And so, like, I guess to dive right into it, I don't think I would be looking at Davis Mills even in like a super flex.
He's one of my lowest quarterbacks in my rankings this week, but also a quarterback I have zero confidence in ranking, if that makes sense. So yeah. And surprisingly, Trav, I was looking at do you know who has the lowest total on the board this week? It's the game, Seattle game, 41 point total, and so that's a low implied total for the Houston Texans. So,
it's going to be a total of 50 plays run in that game.
And I was thinking about it, I don't think Brandin Cooks is somebody I still want to we were talking about Elijah Moore. I'm definitely starting him over Marquise Brown, like Hollywood Brown, 100%. Mike Williams, whether he practices, well, he's not going to practice, but if he plays, I think I'd still start like a Mike Williams over Brandin Cooks.
I would too.
Hunter Renfrow might be an interesting one, maybe a floor versus ceiling debate there, but we just talked about the Raiders.
Jerry Jeudy, I would start over him too. Hunter Renfrow, I have over him. Michael Gallup, I have over him too. So there's definitely.
So I think I'm a little bit higher still on Brandin Cooks. Maybe it's the matchup with Seattle, but I definitely still like Brandin Cooks this week. But I guess I'm tempering expectations. I'm not starting anybody else on Houston.
No, absolutely not. None of the running backs. We don't care about that situation.
Brevin Jordan's usage, I don't like.
Start your Seahawks wide receivers though against them Houston Texans. That's for darn sure. Last one is Logan Thomas. He has gone down again, and I believe RSJ is back in the fold, my dude. So back in the tight end 1 picture, probably, right?
He hasn't played since week 10, but it's interesting. I wouldn't call him like a plug and play tight end 1, but Tyler Conklin in Thursday Night Football is somebody that I had ranked ahead of him. Tyler Higbee plays Arizona, which is a tough matchup, but a high point total. Noah Fant, maybe I'd start over him. Pat Freiermuth, I had ranked significantly ahead of him.
Same.
So Ricky Seals-Jones starts to enter the conversation in that top 15 range, but Gerald Everett, Evan Ingram, Jared Cook, there's guys that I'm not going to argue against people starting over Ricky Seals-Jones because the usage is great. The route run participation, all this stuff is very nice for Ricky Seals-Jones, but the fantasy points just haven't been there. The offensive efficiency just hasn't been there for Washington in recent weeks either. So it's tough because it's not a great matchup against Dallas, and he just hasn't played since week 10 and really wasn't putting up some of the fantasy points that we hoped would come along with some of the usage we were seeing.
Totally. Yeah. I think for me, why I'm maybe a little bit more bullish on him just is maybe leaning into that Dallas matchup a little bit, just for the fact that Dallas should be able to put some points up through the air. And I think Seals-Jones has kind of as good a shot as anybody else on the team to maybe be that second option in the passing game. So that's where I'm sitting with that, just for the chance that he has like a couple big plays or something like that and can score you a touchdown. So I do like Ricky Seals-Jones in that fashion. I have him at 14 this week, so I think we're pretty close in value for sure. But Yeah, Ty. So that's kind of what I got for the. Oh no, sorry, I got a couple of more here actually on the list. I just I laid it out a little differently this week on the old show sheet. Keenan Allen's on the COVID list.
Yeah, this one is weird, and Mike Williams as well as a close contact now. So this is a weird one. Like, so Keenan Allen is vaccinated. Mike Williams is unvaccinated.
Okay.
So that means Keenan Allen needs the multiple positive tests or negative tests so he can play on Sunday. Seems more likely than not that he won't play. Like we should operate under the assumption on Thursday or Friday here that Keenan Allen is not going to play, which sucks because he's the third highest scoring wide receiver since week 9. Mike Williams was added to the COVID list as a close contact of Keenan Allen's. He is unvaccinated, so he will need to do what, not practice all week. So whatever happens, whether he plays or not, he will have not practiced all week. Does that factor into your decision making? Like, do you think you're going to move him up or down because of the fact that he didn't start?
I don't think so.
Or he didn't practice.
I don't think so. I think he's had enough time in the offense. He's had enough chemistry build up with Justin Herbert, even though it's been a little bit spotty from time to time. You know what I mean? Like, I think he's going to be fine to go in there and do that. I think maybe, I think you have to go in on Mike Williams because sure, you got your Josh Palmer. Jalen Guyton scored a nice touchdown this past week. Really nice touchdown. So they do have some other options there, but I think if they're going to work to get Mike Dubs out there, I think they're probably going to use him in fairly heavy fashion this week. So I like Mike Williams this week.
So say Keenan Allen misses, because I think that's more than likely. Do you think somebody like Josh Palmer or Jalen Guyton become, interesting flex plays?
Yeah, well, I think you could toss either of them in, but you
got to choose one.
Yeah, I'd probably go with Jalen Guyton.
Yeah,
it seems like he's had a little bit more of that rapport, and Justin Herbert's been kind of throwing him some of those deep balls too.
I agree. I just think Josh Palmer's played a little bit more in the slot. I like Josh Palmer, and we know second half rookies, they come on a little bit strong.
For sure.
Jalen Guyton, of course, has a little bit of momentum. Big Mo, if you believe in that. But yeah, I think they're kind of coin flips. I don't think I'd be looking to start either of those.
Yeah, I would
even
try
if
not
Keenan
to.
Allen misses. Yeah, definitely. I know there's some KJ Hill, Andre Roberts talk. I think we could see a big ugly platoon in the slot too if Keenan Allen misses.
Yeah, and it should be a nice little day for old Austin Ekeler.
I think he's my RB1 this week.
Yeah, me too. Elijah Mitchell, Ty. Last I saw it. Looks like he's not going to play. Like, I've seen both. I've seen he's rushing.
I'd lean towards not because he was on the list for the concussion. Like, he suffered a concussion last week, but he also had an MRI on his knee this week as well. He's dealing with inflation or something, or irritation in the knee. I can't remember. But yeah, I think it's interesting because Jeff Wilson also on the injury report, but I think he was upgraded today to full participant. He is also dealing with a knee issue. So if Jeff Wilson is the starting running back, are you looking to start him this week?
I absolutely would like to start Jeff Wilson. I think you're starting him as a running back too. I don't think he has what you're getting from Elijah Mitchell in him. I think he could pop off for that, but I would expect the other guys to be mixed in maybe a little bit more because Elijah Mitchell has been just eating work in this backfield. He's got almost 80% of the running back opportunities this season, which is number 4 among running backs. And I don't think Jeff Wilson is going to be the beneficiary of that, right? So,
the thing is, Trey Sermon still injured.
Yep.
Trenton Cannon dealing with an injury as well.
He's there, isn't he?
Yeah, and Jamichael, that's the guy I wanted to bring up because, so Elijah Mitchell being out this week, I think, is something we can operate under that assumption because they also went out and signed Brian Hill. They worked out a few running backs. They went with Brian Hill. So I think, Jeff Wilson could see the bulk of early down work. He's definitely going to have that goal line role, I think, on lockdown. But Jamichael Hasty and him should probably, they're going to have pretty defined roles. I think it's going to be a committee. And Jamichael Hasty could be the passing down guy. Unfortunately, we can't forget about Kyle Juszczyk, I think, though, who is just always used more than we would like or that he's given credit for in the passing game. So I think that has to be
most snaps of any running back over the past 4 weeks on the team.
And so, Juice. I don't think that's I'm not sure JaMychal Hasty is the guy that we're starting in fantasy lineups or even targeting in a DFS setting. And Brian Hill, I don't even know if we need to pick him up right now.
Yeah, no.
Because Jeff Wilson looks like he's going to go. Hasty and him should form kind of a committee with Kyle Juszczyk fucking everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. He's going to vulture a receiving touchdown probably. And I think Hasty, like in a spot where I'm a little bit desperate for a flex, I might put Hasty in there for the fact that he could break off a big play. He's got a little bit of that in his game. We have seen him used in the red zone by Kyle Shanahan, even though Jeff Wilson probably has that role on lock. We have seen Kyle Shanahan trust him in that facet. So I think they trust him to take on some of the carry load for the team.
And the Bengals are probably favored in this game, I would imagine, by a few points. So
and they can score too. And so if he gets a few targets and then 6 to 10 carries or something like that, I think Hasty could be a decent flex if you're in a rough spot, because I definitely have some teams in some rough spots.
And we definitely have to keep on top of this running back room in San Francisco, right? The 49ers, they love to run the ball, third highest ranked PFF run blocking unit according to PFF, and they play Cincinnati, Atlanta, Tennessee, and Houston over the next 4 weeks. 3 of those 4 teams are top 10 matchups, and Houston fantasy championship week is juicy.
H-Town shouty. Kate, last one on the docket here. Darren Waller, he missed practice today, Ty. I'm seeing knee/back injuries for Waller Bills, y'all, which is no bueno, but a missed practice on Thursday. Definitely keeping an eye on the Friday practice reports, because that's going to tell you a lot. If he doesn't practice on Friday, they're probably leaning towards keeping him out again, which, like we talked about a little bit earlier, is good for probably Josh Jacobs, maybe a little bit of Zay Jones, but I'm not looking to start those wide receivers necessarily.
Definitely perpetuates the myth that is Hunter Renfrow, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So
and it's not a myth. The guy's a top 36.
He's sorry. Yeah, I forgot about him,
I think
he's just Hunter Renfrow. You know what I'm saying?
He's just 7-catch Hunter, and unfortunately, that's gonna keep up. I think so long as Darren Waller's out.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe even with Darren Waller coming in there, because he's just kind of cemented as that guy.
And I said top 36 wide receiver. He's closer to like a top 24 wide receiver at this point. Like I think the Mike Williams, it's an interesting conversation. Amari Cooper, Brandon Cooks, Darnell Mooney, like these are guys that I would have in a similar range. Michael Gallup, Odell Beckham. I'm definitely starting Hunter Renfrow over someone like Jerry Jeudy, who, is really struggling lately. So,
I got Hunter Renfrow as my wide receiver 20 on the week. So that's, a nice little spot for him. And it's just kind of cool to see him do it.
Speaking of lame white guys who were drafted in the mid rounds, Jake Fromm is starting for the Giants.
I cannot believe that. The QB1's getting his shot.
QB1 is QB1 in the Big Apple this week. And, laugh all we want, but I had like my eye on Daniel Jones. I hate to admit it, but they get the Chargers, the Cowboys, the Eagles, and the Bears. So they have a pretty advantageous strength of schedule going forward in the Big Apple.
Giddy up. Yeah, that'll be fun to watch.
Speaking of strength of schedule, do you want to get into some schedule information?
Do I? Of course I do. Ty, I just want to give a quick shout out to our friends at Monkey Knife Fight. Said it off the top of the show that we are brought to you by Monkey Knife Fight. And if listeners of the show want to go and enjoy some of the best player prop games in the business, you can go to Monkey Knife Fight and use our promo code TNFF. What that will get you is an instant match on your first deposit of up to $100, an increase from our previous $50. So it's nice to offer that for the people. And so Monkey Knife Fight has been a great partner of True North. And we would love it if you would go over there and have a little bit of fun making some cheddar, throw down the promo code. And like I said, it's a ton of fun. You don't need to do a bunch of research to get into Monkey Knife Fight. You just look at some of the props, check the matchups a little bit, and then you can have some informed decisions and make a little bit of cheddar. So it's fun for the whole family at Monkey Knife Fight. And it's been a good ride with those guys. So Ty, why don't you get us into some of that strength of schedule?
Yeah, I will, but I knocked down the on-air sign, so I don't know if you're
you need to stop.
Yeah, we might not be on air anymore. But I will get it popping,
we're on air,
as they say. With a few quarterbacks, let's go by position here really quick. So I have Aaron Rodgers off the top. I got to tell you, Trav, there isn't a ton of quarterback strength of schedules that jump off the page when you go searching. So Aaron Rodgers might be one of the only ones. Do you worry about some of the limitations? Like we have been kind of an anti-Aaron Rodgers podcast, I would say, over the last year and a half, maybe 2 years. And we definitely ate crow on that, or I did big time last season. This year, it's been a little bit of a different story, but he was the quarterback 2 overall in week 11 and week 12 before the Packers went on their bye last week. Now, off of their bye week, they have 3 of their 4 remaining games against top 10 matchups for quarterbacks, like top 10 opponents in fantasy points allowed to the quarterback position. So do you think Aaron Rodgers is somebody who can win folks leagues this year?
I don't know if I'm ready to say that necessarily. Like, I don't know if he's going to be putting up 4 touchdown games where he's going to win weeks for you. I think he's going to keep that stability in the quarterback room, and he can give you some of those top 5 weeks here and there. But I don't see these, you mentioned he was quarterback 2 the past 2 weeks. I don't see that continuing week after week after week for him necessarily, even with those matchups. So I'm not quite there yet to say that he's going to win you leagues, but I think he's going to be a great plug and play. You don't have to worry about your quarterback position. So not an indictment on Aaron Rodgers' standing as far as a fantasy quarterback, because I think he's kind of a clutch play for teams right now because he's kind of safe, right? I think he's a pretty safe option.
No, I agree. And you look at, you said you might not be the guy throwing 4 touchdown passes. He did that against the Vikings a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
One of those games that he scored as quarterback 2 overall. And that's who he gets in fantasy championship week. So I do like that at the very least. So a few of the other guys are interesting, like Taysom Hill. I love me some Taysom Hill. He's a quarterback 3 overall last week in a game against the Cowboys where his offense scored 17 points. So, and he's now scored as a QB1 for fantasy in all 5 of his starts in the NFL going back to last season. So the Saints quarterbacks get the Jets, the Buccaneers, the Dolphins, and Carolina. So 3 straight really good matchups, but Carolina week 17 is a little tough. What do you think about Taysom Hill going forward? Any worries about Jameis getting back in there? What are you doing with the schedule that juicy?
I think the juicy schedule means that if they're going to win games, it's going to be the Taysom show. The Taysom show going forward. Alvin Kamara is coming back, so we're interested to see what his role looks like. Obviously, we don't think he's going to get the same amount of targets, but this is a guy that was getting like 20 plus carries per before he went down with his injury. So it'll be interesting to see whether that continues with Taysom Hill taking some of those carries. Maybe they just revert a little bit run heavy because the receivers haven't really been getting it done either. And then we know Taysom has some limitations as a passer, but I have Taysom this week as a top 10 quarterback. And I think with those juicy matchups, you have to be operating under that, just for the fact that the guy is probably going to run one in at least in a game. And then he's going to break off a big run alongside that. So, and then he couples that big run with a touchdown, and it's just harmony for your fantasy roster. You know what I mean? So yeah, it doesn't really matter. He can throw for 150, 1 touchdown and 1 interception, but that rushing that he's going to give you is just so worth it. It's a different kind of safe plug and play,
The rushing floor is just so high. I mean, last week he became just 3rd quarterback this season to have a 100-yard rushing game. Kind of amazing he didn't punch in a touchdown last week, especially considering he had like 3 rushing touchdowns on 19 carries this season heading into that 100-yard rushing performance. Actually, fun fact, Taysom is tied with Josh Allen for the 4th most rushing touchdowns since the beginning of last season. So needless to say, I also love Taysom as a top 10 quarterback this week against the Jets. It's actually not as great of a matchup as it seems, for sure. Like, the Jets have allowed actually the 3rd most rushing yards as a defense, the most rushing touchdowns in all of football, but the Jets have actually allowed the 3rd fewest rushing yards to quarterbacks and just 1 rushing touchdown to the position all season. But and that's because the Jets are so bad against running backs. They're just a pure running back funnel right now. They give up like 120 yards rushing per game basically to running backs. Only 3 teams allow over 1.0 rushing touchdowns per game to running backs. They're allowing 1.5, which is just insane. And then, like you mentioned, Alvin Kamara is expected back. So there's some narratives to tie to for the Death to Taysom team, which there is a lot of members of, unfortunately, but that has been such a losing play in all 5 of Taysom Hill starts. Speaking of a losing play, Derek Carr has a very good strength of schedule. I've always argued against him as like somebody who's playing for second, so to speak, at the position in fantasy. But Derek Carr does have a pretty juicy strength of schedule. Do you have any interest in him as one of the guys that might be on your waiver wire right now that could actually contribute to you winning a fantasy league?
Yeah, I'm not super into him even as like a streamer. I was saying it at the beginning of the show that I used some of the fantasy points tools for some of my digging on some of the strength of schedule, and their strength of schedule tool is really sweet because you can filter it by defensive opponents' points allowed per position. Okay, easy there, bud.
Boop, boop, boop.
Easy there, bud. Oh, our audio listeners are gonna be, what the fuck was that? Yeah, Ty was pointing down at the promo code on the screen, and that screen just has to be very near my bathing suit area. And so I just didn't want him getting any ideas. But don't get any ideas on starting Derek Carr, in my opinion, because when you look at the strength of schedule tool at fantasypoints.com, I was looking at the last 4 weeks and the defense's points allowed against quarterbacks. So they play Kansas City, Cleveland, Denver, and Indianapolis next. 3 of those opponents are averaging less than 14 points per game allowed to quarterbacks over the past 4 weeks. And that 4th team is the Denver Broncos. They have allowed a little bit more, but we know that Denver defense is really, really good. And it is Derek Carr we're talking about, who this week against Kansas City might not have Darren Waller. So for that reason, I think if you go that route, it might be a bit of a bumper car if you try to go that route, Ty. But yeah, I'm not buying in on Derek Carr.
Yeah, he is top 5 in completions, in attempts, in passing yards, in intended air yards, in completed air yards. Do you know how many top 7 quarterback finishes he has in fantasy? Big 0. A big fat 0. Like, it's kind of amazing that he has, been the quarterback 8 at best, even though he's top 5 in all these categories. It just blows my mind. The only other guy I had on here was the New York Giants quarterback. We're not going to talk about Jake Fromm or Daniel Jones. So let's
Can we though?
On. Okay, cool. No
okay,
point.
Cool. Yeah,
There's
no, it's cool.
Point.
No, it's cool. It's cool. Yeah, no.
I'm barely starting Saquon Barkley in one league. It's amazing just the way I hit on the running back position in that one. So let's go to that position and do some amazing strength schedules or some league winning candidates here. DeAndre Swift / Jamal Williams, I guess we could say. So they get the Broncos, the Cardinals, the Falcons, and the Seahawks. So those are top 5 matchups, week 16 and 17 in semifinals and championship week for fantasy. And Atlanta and Seattle both give up a ton of production to running backs in the receiving game, especially Seattle. And I'm telling you, like, DeAndre Swift could eat in fantasy championship week. So do you think DeAndre Swift is somebody that's going to have one of the higher win percentages in fantasy football this year? And do you think the Lions in this offense have enough room to maybe produce multiple running backs that could be in league-winning lineups?
Yeah, I don't know if the second guy, which would be Jamal Williams, would necessarily be quite to league-winning levels, because I think when DeAndre Swift is in there, he's got the role on lock. But absolutely, I think DeAndre Swift could be a league winner. And Jamal Williams, if DeAndre Swift stays out a little bit longer, you know what I mean? Like, Jamal Williams could get you right into the dance the next couple weeks if DeAndre Swift is out. And then DeAndre Swift could bring it home as that championship winner. You were talking about those matchups, Arizona and Seattle particularly, Ty. They are giving up over 30 points per game to the running back position over the past 4 weeks since week 10. And there's only 6 teams that have done that. So 2 of the 6 teams are on the docket for DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams. So I really like that. And I like it because if I have Jamal Williams, I know kind of what I'm getting, because unless I see it, I'm probably going to have a hard time starting him with DeAndre Swift healthy. But if I know DeAndre Swift is healthy, you're slotting him in there as that running back too, and you're forgetting about it because he's going to be really, really good. We've seen him get some targets. Sure, we've seen Godwin Igwebuike, I think is the name. Sure, we've seen him get some snaps and maybe a few targets. They actually had their first win this past week, and Jamal Williams coincidentally only saw 1 target in that game. So that was kind of interesting. But he had 5 targets 2 weeks ago. And way back in week 1, he did have 9 targets with a healthy DeAndre Swift on only 32 snaps. So he's been trusted in that area of the game. So I think Jamal Williams is great if DeAndre Swift is out. A little bit sketchier, more of a flex play if DeAndre Swift is in.
Yeah, but we're not dropping him just when DeAndre Swift comes back. And DeAndre Swift was a DNP, did not practice on Thursday. Speaking of which, I had Elijah Mitchell, San Francisco 49ers running backs on here. We talked a little bit about that above. Austin Ekeler I had on here, but no point talking about him. You're obviously starting him. I just think he's going to be like a top 3 running back in rankings every week, basically, with the Giants, the Chiefs, Houston, and then Denver. A little bit of a sour finish to the season. So just keep that in mind with Austin Ekeler. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is somebody I wanted to bring up because he gets the Raiders, the Chargers, the Steelers, and the Bengals. Those are all top 12 matchups. Might be all top 10 matchups now that I think of it. Ironically, Clyde Edwards-Helaire has not finished as an RB12 or higher, hasn't finished higher than RB12 all season long. And I think he's been the running back 15 and running back 23 in the 2 games since he's been back from injury. So pretty close. But do you think Clyde Edwards-Helaire has that ceiling, given some of the things that he's lacked this season? Do you think he has the ceiling to be that running back 1, that league-winning candidate this year, given that strength schedule?
It's tricky to say because I just think he's ceding that little bit of work to Darrell Williams. He's getting 13 to 16 opportunities per game, which is great. But I think the ceiling is probably that top 12 running back. So I think for a guy who's coming back off of an injury, who you've kind of operated most of the season relying without, I think he's going to be great for you. But do I think he's going to come in and be like a top 5, top 8 running back the rest of the way? I don't quite think so. I think in that top 14, 15 area is right where he's going to settle in, which is definitely no slouch by any means. I love that strength of schedule and I like the 13 to 16 opportunities, but just to this point, they haven't been kind of that high upside opportunities. You know what I mean? So I think
we say running back drops off for a reason, like it. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, he's only got 1 rushing touchdown on the season.
It's crazy.
2 receiving touchdowns. Not since week 4 though, so it's just the touchdowns aren't coming for him.
And the situation has been prime. Like when it comes to you kind of get a glimpse of what we should hold most dear for running backs in fantasy, and that's the receiving.
Absolutely,
because the Chiefs are the 2nd highest graded run blocking unit on PFF, 2nd in yards before contact per attempt. The problem with Clyde, besides the snaps, sort of like you alluded to, ceding some work to Darrell Williams, it's actually twofold. So the use in the passing game, 15 targets all season long, that fucking sucks. He's so dangerous in that facet of the game. He averages 8.8 yards after the catch per reception in his career. That's elite stuff, but just 49 career catches now. That is pretty close to what I had hoped he would be putting up each season, basically on a 16-game pace. So
minimum,
The other frustration, as you alluded to, is the touchdowns, right? Thank God he has those pair of receiving touchdowns, Trav, because, on his 13 total catches all season, he has a pair of receiving touchdowns, but those are 2 games that have been his highest scoring fantasy weeks this year, back in weeks 4 and 5, I think, or weeks 3 and 4 or whatever. Which isn't too surprising because Clyde Edwards-Helaire has scored just 1 touchdown on the ground. That's amazing. That you mentioned that. And, the upside has just been kind of limited. I actually looked on PFF.com. I think I tweeted this out. Clyde Edwards-Helaire in his first game of his career had 6 carries inside the 5-yard line. Right. In the 19 games since, he has just 4. So he's really not given us the passing work that we had hoped for. And he's not even benefiting from being in this elite offense at the goal line like we had hoped for. So, and like you mentioned, he's almost splitting snaps with Darrell Williams right now. But, to cap this off, I want to say in this offense with that strength of schedule, we could see some big blow-up weeks from the running back in Kansas City, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, is the most likely to kind of reclaim this backfield and get that stranglehold on it over Darrell Williams down the stretch. And we already saw he had 65% of the team's carries this past week compared to about 23% for Darrell Williams. So just needs to get those goal line carries and, maybe this strength of schedule presents those opportunities a little bit more. Yeah. So do you have any interest in Darrell Williams? Do you think he's somebody who belongs in lineups that could be, championship chasers?
No, I think he's only getting 4 to 6 touches a game or something like that. Not really that much work for Darrell Williams. I think he's just kind of coming in because he is that veteran that knows the offense. And I mean, you talk about those goal line carries, that first game of his career where he had 6 carries, I think he had 0 touchdowns in that game. Talk about holding a grudge, Andy. Holy shit. Yeah. He's just no, picked you in the first round just last week there, bud. You come in, you can't score a touchdown at the goal line. Patrick freaking recommended your ass. Now I'm pissed off about it. So you're getting your ass between the 20s and you're not coming near pay dirt, apparently.
It's sad. And, Andy Reid definitely isn't actually doing
No,
that, but
absolutely
it sure
not.
feels like it.
Yeah,
But
totally.
it sure feels like it. So can't talk about Clyde Edwards-Helaire without going to JT, just the Josh Jacobs, Miles Sanders thing going on here.
Yeah.
So Jonathan Taylor, like arguably the dynasty running back one, maybe the 101 in startups right now. But I just wanted to mention that he does have a pretty advantageous strength of schedule. They're on a bye this week, which sucks if your playoffs happen to start this week. And FFPC leagues, we do experience that a lot. Patriots the following week doesn't look great, but the Cardinals in Las Vegas, you mentioned the Cardinals over the last 5 weeks have been a very good matchup. The Raiders as well. Both those are top 5 matchups over the last 5 weeks. So JT is obvious. Yeah. Awesome. He could win us some leagues just like last year. What about Nyheim Hines? Do you have any interest in Nyheim Hines down the stretch?
No, like I just don't think he's getting enough, and we've seen Jonathan Taylor take over. Yeah, we've seen Jonathan Taylor take over some of the targets as well, which is all you're hoping for Nyheim Hines. I was looking at it; he's only got 26% of the snaps since week 10, averaging 17 snaps total per game, and only 22 total opportunities across those games where. He's got 12 targets and JT has 16 in that span. So really? I think that's pretty telling that Jonathan Taylor is getting the whole pie. So no Nyheim Hines for this guy.
Those 3 remaining opponents for the Colts, they all allow 6+ receptions to running backs and 40+ receiving yards to the position per game. And the Colts, I think, are going to be big dogs. Not big dogs. They're going to be underdogs against the Patriots coming off their bye week. And they're going to be big dogs against Arizona. So I think that's pretty interesting in the semifinals there. So Nyheim Hines might not be the beneficiary of that. James Robinson is somebody I had on here. Tennessee, Houston, the Jets, and then the Patriots in the final week. Will he be James RB1 son down the stretch?
I think he's right on the cusp, man. I think he's right in there. He's getting those 4-ish targets a game to go along with those 15-ish carries. You know what I mean? So I think that's all you can hope for. And he's pretty much the only show on this offense aside from maybe a little bit of Laquan Treadwell. You know what I'm saying? But I think he's kind of all this offense has, you know what I mean? And I think, you got to rely on that because, Carlos Hyde's not really doing much to take, well, maybe a little bit.
They liked him last week after that fumble in the first drive for
I think
James.
No doubt. I think James Robinson can have some big plays here and there, though. And I think he's going to ultimately come in there and kind of take that work.
No, I love it. Like Titans this week, and J-Rob was RB1 son in their first meeting of the season. And the Texans next week are the 6th best running back matchup, followed by the Jets, who are allowing 36 PPR points per game to the running backs this year, by far and away the most. So even the Pats in championship week, like it seems daunting because their defense has been potent or whatever, but they allow the 18th most fantasy points to the running back position compared to being like one of the toughest matchups for quarterbacks and wide receivers, the toughest for tight ends going against New England. So you'd like to be a running back, I guess, against the Patriots.
100%.
And the concerns are why he isn't being talked up more, I think, is like it might have to do with him dealing with some nagging injuries and stuff. But and I did want to point out that he fumbled on the first drive of the game last week, and then he was sat for the next 3 drives, which sucks. So I'm not sure Carlos Hyde gets into the conversation, but it's frustrating to know that, Urban Meyer seems to still have an affinity for this fucking guy. So, James Robinson is definitely somebody I'm going to rank as an RB2 for the time being.
Yeah. Okay.
So pretty much all I got for the running back position. Want to go to the wide receivers with the Titans off the top. They get the Jaguars, the Steelers, the 49ers, and the Dolphins. Those are 3 top 10 matchups in there. And the 49ers, who are not a top 10 matchup, are actually the 3rd best wide receiver matchup over the past 5 weeks. So do you have any faith with Julio Jones set to return this week? Or are you kind of avoiding the passing game in Tennessee still with this gross running back by committee that's kind of formed?
Yeah, I don't think it's a full avoid. I'm not like stoked about Julio Jones. Like if we're talking AJ Brown in this same slot with that same strength of schedule, I'm going to say he's a top 12 wide receiver going forward rest of the season. But I don't think that's going to be the case necessarily for Julio Jones. I think it might be a little bit more ugly. I don't think it was even the prettiest with AJ Brown when he was healthy and producing. No. You know what I mean? So I think if you layer that in with some of the stuff that's hampered Julio and a team that he hasn't really played a whole ton of football with, you know what I mean? So I think, you can expect Julio probably to be a top 24 option just through volume alone, but I don't think he's a guy who I'm looking to say, yeah, he's going to take exactly what AJ Brown was giving you, because it's not quite apples to apples for me there.
I have absolutely no idea where I've ranked Julio Jones, and I want to take a look really quick just because
samesies.
I'm not sure I've actually inserted him into my lineup.
Right, yeah, just because it's a little bit murky.
I'm not sure he's going to crack my top 24 now that I look at it. I haven't put him in yet, but we were talking about guys like Hunter Renfrow, who's already on the cusp for me, and Amari Cooper, who obviously I love in that matchup against Washington. Brandin Cooks is somebody that I'll have a hard time sitting because he's playing the Seahawks. So, maybe not as high as I thought I might be.
Well, I'm feeling a little bit disrespectful right now because I look at my rankings and I think I'm just kind of at a tentative spot with him to make sure that he's playing and good to go. But it looks like he is going to. I have him at 31 right now for the week, just behind Jarvis Landry, Odell, Brandin, Ayuk. So I think, he could move up a touch, but I don't know. I think that's kind of right where I'd probably have him. Julio.
So I want to go to the Miami Dolphins because, I want to talk about Jaylen Waddle a little bit. First of all, the Miami Dolphins are on a bye this week, but they got the Jets, the Saints, and Tennessee week 17. The Titans in fantasy championship week, they allow the most fantasy points to wide receivers, most catches per game, most touchdowns per game, pretty much everything. They give up almost 200 yards receiving per game to wide receivers. The Saints in the semifinals, they allow the third most yards per game to wide receivers this year. So do you think there's a chance that Jaylen Waddle could be a league winner, or do you worry about guys like Devontae Parker, even Will Fuller coming back off their bye week?
I don't know if I'd really say I worry, because I think Jaylen Waddle is probably still the 1A at least on this team. Mike Gesicki might be the second option, you know what I mean? So I think among wide receivers, Jaylen Waddle is the guy who easily offers you the most upside. Like, that's the guy who, if you're taking a shot, you're going to take that shot on Jaylen Waddle for sure. I think maybe they cap him just a little bit just because of the way the offense operates, the way Tua operates, you know what I mean? That high completion percentage, but they've done a lot of running the ball near the red zone, and he hasn't thrown a ton of touchdowns, obviously. So I think Jaylen Waddle would have to create a little bit for himself, but I think, like I said, among those wide receivers, he's the guy who's going to do that. So I would say he's, right in that probably back end wide receiver 2 rest of the season for me, I would say. But I think it's going to be a little bit of a bumpy road wide receiver 2,
Yeah, I'm not expecting like the massive ceiling that we've been kind of waiting for with Jaylen, or at least what we could see with that type of volume. We know the average up target's a little bit low, but Devontae Parker might be himself like a wide receiver 4 when he comes back off the bye week, and maybe Will Fuller the same. But I just think those matchups are so unbelievably juicy, especially in fantasy championship week, and Saints have been just a terrific matchup as well. And then you even look at the Jets this week, like they've been the 8th, they've given up the 8th most fantasy points to wide receivers over the past 6 weeks. And Jaylen Waddle actually scored a rushing touchdown, I think, against them earlier in the season to go along with like his patented 8 catches for 50 yards or whatever it was back in that game. So I want to go to another guy that we think is very talented, but sometimes we worry about the usage in the offense. So I want to talk about Brandin Ayuk really quick. Maybe Deebo Samuel, but the 49ers wide receivers will get really nice strength schedule coming up against the Bengals, the Falcons, the Titans, and then the Texans in fantasy championship week. Those are all 4 top 12 matchups for wide receivers. So do you think Brandin Ayuk is going to be, a player who ends up with a really high win percentage in best ball in seasonal leagues, or do you think Deebo is going to come back and really dick that up?
Well, I think judging by what we've seen all season long, I think Debo does come in, and as long as he's healthy, he's going to be the number one guy on this offense. George Kittle might have a little something to say about that, but I don't think Brandon Ayuk is going to be the guy who's going to have something to say about that. So I think Brandon Ayuk definitely would take a bit of a back seat. I don't know. Is Debo playing this week? I don't think he's playing this week, is he?
He's not, but Kittle, Kittle was the guy that we needed to mention because he's really coming on strong, of course, and he just looks sensational last week.
Yeah, he looked so good last week, man. He caught some really nice touchdowns. Kind of a resurgence for him because it's been kind of a tough year on him. Obviously, he was injured a little bit, but I think it's nice to see him insert himself back into that easy top 3 option, especially for us rankers who've been putting him there. And seeing some of that production is just kind of nice to see from Kittle. And, George Kittle producing is just good for the league,
It really is. The guy is a lot of people's favorite player.
Yep.
So maybe let's do a couple more actually. So Elijah Moore is somebody I had on here, but we talked about him off the top, but I just can't stress enough the Saints, Dolphins, Jaguars, Buccaneers.
Cash
really,
money.
really amazing.
Cash money, Elijah Moore.
Speaking of those Buccaneers, I want to talk about their wide receivers really quick. So Godwin and Mike Evans have Buffalo, New Orleans, Carolina, and the Jets. The Bills are the toughest matchup for wide receivers this season, and Carolina has been pretty tough as well. But the Panthers have allowed 100-yard days to wide receivers in back-to-back weeks now. Earlier in the season, we saw Thielen and Jefferson put up good fantasy days in the same matchup. The Jets have allowed the 6th most fantasy points, like I mentioned, over the last 6 weeks, or the 8th most, maybe, I can't remember, but plus matchup. And Buffalo is they had 100-yard, multiple 100-yard wide receivers in week 10 against I think it was the Dolphins who had, I think it was Waddle and Mac Hollins who both had
Mac Daddy
in week in a different week, but the Jets also did it. So these are pretty good matchups. Do you think Godwin and Evans are going to be league winners? Do you think they both can be simultaneously, or do we have to pick between the two?
I think they could. Like, I think Godwin would have to be on the back of heavy target volume, lots of work after the catch, and then Mike Williams and Mike Evans for that matter are going to need to do it on a bunch of deep passing and some red zone work. But the nice thing about that for those guys, that those two things kind of mesh very well to be able to happen in concert with each other. So with Antonio Brown out for a few more, is he out for the rest of the season? I think.
Not sure. I don't think he's suspended for 3
they'll
games.
They'll bring him back for the playoffs. So it's
I
not
just can't remember if it's week 17
fantasy.
or week 18, but he is serving a suspension.
Yeah, we'll have to peep that. But anyway, with him being out, that's like a big feather. And I think both of these guys caps because he was soaking up some targets.
Well, and the Bucs have incentive just kind of hold him out to the playoffs anyway.
Absolutely. And then behind him, they got Brashad Perriman pulled off the street, and Tyler Johnson being underutilized, and Jalen Darden, of course. But I don't think I think this is more of a funnel to those two guys, and we've especially seen that to Chris Godwin. He's been absolutely lighting it up with 36 targets over the past 4 weeks. Only 1 touchdown in that span, but he's been getting a lot of yards after the catch.
It's all Gronk. Gronk.
Yeah, Gronk obviously getting in there with. It's actually been really spread out. You look at the receiving touchdowns over the past 4 weeks. Chris Godwin has 1, and then Fournette, Evans, Gronk, Brait. They all have 2.
Yeah,
so very spread out. There's no preferred target. Timmy Brady's just spreading it around, sharing the love to all the boys.
And I think that would be how we should leave the conversation of the Bucs, is that you want to be starting Buccaneers players down the stretch here.
Yeah.
And it sucks that they play Buffalo this week, but maybe it just gives you an opportunity to see some price drops in DFS or buy low if you can. Let's move to the tight end position and wrap up here. I want to talk about the cream of that 2019 crop, I believe. Just Noah Fant, TJ Hawkinson. Noah Fant has definitely not delivered on some of the talent that he possesses.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, he's not even getting the usage some of us would expect him to command. And gets the Lions and the Bengals over the next 2 weeks, which aren't great matchups. But then the Raiders and the Chargers, who rank 2nd and 7th, respectively, in fantasy points allowed to the tight end position. And actually, the Bengals and Lions actually allow the 4th and 7th most tight end points over the last 5 weeks. So actually, it's a pretty sexy strength schedule. Mm-hmm. Do you think Noah Fant is in a situation, though, where he can deliver on that strength of schedule or take advantage of it for fantasy owners and be a league winner?
Yeah, well, I think if you look at the matchups, like Detroit looks like a game where they'll probably run the ball. Detroit's not terrible necessarily against against the wide receiver position as much as you would think they are necessarily. And then Cincinnati can put up a bunch of points. Maybe not so against Denver's defense, but yeah, I do think Noah Fant can be that kind of top 10 guy for you. We've seen him get some touchdowns here and there. We know he's a yak monster, so he can do some of that on his own. So yeah, I definitely think he can be that guy for you. It's a really crowded target totem pole for the Denver Broncos, though, so it's a tough
Even
one.
with AOK in there,
it's hard to even feel confident starting Noah Fant, but I think it really depends on what your other options are. But streaming might not be better than Noah Fant is kind of where I'm going.
No, that's really well said, and it's easy to say like Noah Fant should be more involved in the Broncos offense, but it's another thing to see that put into motion, especially down the stretch when you're relying on it in fantasy. So a lot of people have been relying on TJ Hawkinson, and that's who kind of I was thinking of with Noah Fant, who has a very feast or famine strength of schedule here. He back-to-back games with a touchdown. Now he's really coming on strong again after a really strong start to the season. But Denver this week, Arizona next week, very tough matchups. But the Broncos get Atlanta and Seattle after that. So 2 bottom 5 matchups, followed by 2 really plus matchups in fantasy football semifinals and championship week. So do you think that TJ Hawkinson can be that guy who's scoring up there with the Kelseys, the Kittles down the stretch here?
I think the production's just a little bit spotty for me to put him up there with those guys. I think those touchdowns need to continue to over the past 2 weeks. Before that, his last touchdown was in week 2, and he had back-to-back games in weeks 1 and 2 with touchdowns, coincidentally. So that's got to keep up, which we haven't necessarily seen. And then if you look at the targets over the past, say, 4 weeks, last week he had 8, then 3 before that, 8 before that, 1 before that, 11, 9, and 11 before that. So we like that little 3-game stretch, but since then it's been a little bit spottier, and they've been trying a lot of wide receiver options churning through this team. Josh Reynolds has come on a little bit. We've seen Amon-Ra St. Brown come on a little bit. We saw a little bit of Cephas previously in the season. There's just been a ton of guys coming through there that they've been trying to get some chemistry and rapport with Jared Goff. And, he's getting a little bit of that with Amon-Ra and a little bit of Josh Reynolds, who he's played with before. So I think that could be a little bit of factor in his spotty targets, but I don't think you're necessarily sitting him, because behind that echelon of guys that you just mentioned, are guys that are still top 10 tight ends that you're going to be starting every week just because of the volume they present. And then the touchdown upside that TJ Hawkinson can present as well. So I'm not saying don't start him, but I'm just saying I'm not necessarily putting him in that top 5 with those guys that you were talking about.
See, I kind of think both are true. So the next 2 weeks, I kind of totally agree with you. He might not be that top 5 guy that we're hoping he can turn back into, you know what I mean? And then but against the Falcons, and especially against Seattle's actually allowed, I think they've allowed the most fantasy points to the tight ends over the last 5 weeks, maybe the last 6 weeks. But, I really like that championship matchup, and I think he could have a very high win percentage in seasonal leagues.
And I think you're right to actually say that too, because in saying what I said, that you're not going to sit TJ Hawkinson, if he blows up in those final weeks, he's going to get you there anyway, because you had him in your tight end spot in those tough matchups beforehand. So yeah, you swayed me there. He is going to be that league winner because he's got those 2 juicy ones in the final 2 weeks. So, alrighty, Ty, I think that just about does her for the show tonight. It was a good time getting back in the lair with you. It's always fun doing these in-person ones. We're going to keep the pre-record going. We're going to keep doing these in-person ones because it's a lot of fun to get together. We got our little setup going, and we're only going to keep improving it. So please, if you checked it out, leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you got any suggestions for the setup here, I know it's pretty minimalistic. We're kind of going for that a little bit, but feel free to let us know what you think. And as always, we're always taking suggestions for topics or things you'd like to see us break down. Go to the website. You can submit stuff through the website and let us know what you'd like to see on there as well. We just want all the feedback. We want to know that you guys are checking out our stuff and you're interested in hearing what we have to say about fantasy football, because we have a good time bringing it to you. So we hope you have a good time soaking it up. Want to give a big shout out to our friends at Trophy Smack, Monkey Knife Fight, and of course, all the homies in the Fantasy Points Media Group. Love all of them. Any parting shots for the people, Ty?
No, make sure you're checking out Sons of DFS tonight, and we will be back in your earphones probably on Thursday morning next week.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys bearing with us on the scheduling stuff. It's been a bit of a crazy season, but we're kind of settling in and we're liking this pre-record. And don't forget about the point after on Saturday night, getting you prepped for those matchups as well, because the boys are doing great over there with Jules and Coach Craig holding down that Saturday night fort. So until next week, I am Trav. This is Ty. This is the True North Fantasy Lair. And we say peace.